My sister switched my wedding dress for a cheap knockoff. She gasped when I walked down the aisle in the designer gown she wanted for herself. Hi, I'm Emma. But before I tell you how it all began, let me know from which country you're watching from in the comments. Looking back, it's almost laughable how much effort she put into trying to ruin the happiest day of my life. My sister, the self-proclaimed queen of everything, had been obsessed with being the center of attention for as long as I could remember. She was the type who made sure her high school prom photos looked like magazine covers and would casually drop comments about how no one would notice me at my own wedding. I had long accepted that she thrived on drama and petty competitions, but I had no idea she would stoop to sabotage my dress. We had spent months preparing for the wedding. I'd designed my gown with a world-class designer, the kind that required private fittings and secret shipping because I didn't want her sneaky hands anywhere near it. My sister, of course, complained about everything, from the venue to the color of the bridesmaids' dresses, but I brushed it off as harmless jealousy. I had no idea that she was plotting something much bigger. The morning of the wedding, I woke up excited, radiating that pre-ceremony glow. I went to the bridal suite expecting the usual mix of nerves and adrenaline, only to find disaster. The gown I had meticulously planned, the gown I had imagined myself walking down the aisle in, was gone. In its place hung a cheap imitation, the kind that looks fine from a distance but falls flat up close. My heart sank. I could feel my face tighten, a mix of shock, disbelief, and rage coursing through me. This wasn't just a prank. This was sabotage. And it was personal. As I stood there trying to process how she had managed this stunt, I could hear the faint giggle of my sister behind me. Her smug expression made my blood boil. She had been waiting for me to notice, for the moment when I would freak out and ruin my own day. And yes, for a second I felt like screaming, crying, or storming out, but then a much sweeter idea crossed my mind. Revenge. Sweet hot revenge. I quickly slipped on a thick robe, ignoring her shocked gasp, and grabbed my phone. My designer had prepared a backup gown, a masterpiece I hadn't yet tried on, delivered in a discreet black box. I calmly texted the delivery service to send it up immediately. While she fumed and whispered under her breath, I planned my entrance. I wasn't going to let her see panic. She needed to see the full effect of her failure. And I was going to savor every second of it. As the minutes ticked by, I could hear the wedding coordinator panicking, the bridesmaids whispering nervously, and my sister trying to maintain her composure. Kept my calm. I even smiled as if nothing was wrong. As nothing was wrong. I had control of the situation and she didn't. That realization alone was intoxicating. The gown arrived just in time and I slipped into it with ease. The moment I stepped into the mirror, I felt the transformation. This wasn't just a dress, it was a statement. It was a middle finger to every petty thing my sister had ever done to me, a testament to patience, planning, and elegance. I glided toward the ceremony room, and that's when it happened. I saw her gasp, not a faint, polite gasp, but a full-on, jaw-dropping, flustered gasp that made my heart do a little victory dance. The guests noticed it too. You could feel the shift in energy the second I walked in. All eyes on me, every whisper turning toward admiration instead of scandal. My sister's plan had completely backfired. She had imagined me embarrassed, crying, flustered, and instead she had created my stage. It was poetic. Sweet, hot, poetic revenge. The rivalry with my sister had been simmering for as long as I could remember. Growing up, she was always the golden child in my parents' eyes, the one whose opinions mattered, whose accomplishments were celebrated. I was the quieter one, the one who could be overlooked, and she never let me forget it. From birthday parties to family vacations, she thrived on attention and subtle digs. It was never malicious at first, just those small comments that made you feel invisible. But over time it escalated. By the time I got engaged, I knew she would stop at nothing to steal my spotlight. I had tried everything to keep her in check. I didn't share every detail of the wedding planning, I limited her access to vendors, and I made sure that the big things, the cake, the venue, the dress, remained secrets. But my sister was cunning. She had ways of finding out things I thought were locked down, from friends, casual social media slips, even nosy relatives. By the time she found out about my designer gown, I knew she was plotting. The subtle comments she dropped over dinner, the fake excitement when we discussed fittings, all of it was leading to this moment. And the audacity of thinking she could switch my dress without me noticing? I'll admit it was impressive. If it weren't so infuriating, I might have laughed. The morning of the wedding had been tense, even before the dress switch. I had a premonition, a tiny nagging feeling that something was off. My sister's demeanor was too sweet, her smiles too practiced. But I brushed it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. Little did I know the cheap knockoff she swapped in was her final act of sabotage, a culmination of years of petty envy and manipulation. When I realized what she had done, I could feel every inch of my body tense. My heart raced, not with fear but with adrenaline. This was the moment I had been waiting for, not to ruin her day but to show her that cleverness and patience can be far more powerful than brazen attacks. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't flail. I smiled. Calmly. Because I had a plan and I knew the backup dress was my ace in the hole. Once the designer gown arrived, I changed quickly in the suite, slipping into the fabric like a second skin. Every stitch, every bead, every detail seemed to scream triumph. I could feel the confidence radiating from me, a tangible aura that no petty scheme could touch. I had transformed the moment of betrayal into an opportunity for empowerment, and the timing was perfect. As I walked down the aisle, the energy shifted. The gasps were immediate, not from horror but from awe. Guests whispered among themselves, heads turning, phones raising to capture every step. And then I saw it. My sister, her face frozen in disbelief, her perfectly crafted smile failing her for the first time. That gasp I had seen in the mirror was nothing compared to the reaction in real time, in front of hundreds of people who had come to celebrate our union. She had been completely blindsided and it was delicious to watch. But the best part wasn't just the gasps or the awe. It was how the power dynamic had shifted instantly. She had spent years attempting to control narratives, to manipulate moments and to assert dominance over me. In that instant it was all gone. I had taken control of the story, the ceremony, and the spectacle. Every glance from my family, every cheer from the guests, every tear in my mother's eye, reinforced that I had not only survived her sabotage but had turned it into an unforgettable triumph. By the time the vows were exchanged, I could feel the weight of years of envy and petty rivalry lift. I had stood my ground without confrontation, handled the crisis with calm precision, and created a moment that would forever be remembered, not for drama but for brilliance. The wedding day had become a stage for my own empowerment, and my sister's plan had unknowingly provided it. The reception was in full swing, and I could feel the tension radiating from my sister the moment I stepped in, wearing the designer gown she had desperately tried to steal for herself. The whispers and glances around the room weren't just admiration. They were the collective shock of witnessing her plan completely unravel. Every guest who had been privy to her petty schemes now watched as her sabotage boomeranged spectacularly. The cheap knockoff she had hidden in my suite was useless, forgotten, and exposed her for the schemer she truly was. My sister had spent months imagining this victory, rehearsing in her mind how she would bask in my humiliation, how everyone would gasp at her brilliance. Instead, every move she had meticulously planned now highlighted her failure. The contrast was undeniable. Her greed, her envy, and her manipulations were now transparent to everyone. Guests whispered among themselves, noticing the stark difference between my radiant confidence and her desperate attempts at composure. The irony was delicious. She had intended to steal the spotlight, but in trying to do so, she illuminated my strength even brighter. When she finally approached me under the pretense of civility, I could see the panic in her eyes. She tried to laugh it off, attempted some forced compliment about the gown, but the words stumbled out clumsily, betraying her frustration. Every step she took reminded me of how much effort she had invested in failure. The moment she realized that her sabotage had not only failed but also elevated me in the eyes of everyone present was the climax I had silently anticipated. She had unknowingly provided the perfect stage for my revenge. I let her fumble, offering only a subtle, knowing smile. There was no need for confrontation. The effect had already been achieved. Every cheer for me, every camera flash, every look of admiration solidified her defeat. Even my parents, who had sometimes indulged her, were now keenly aware of the stark difference between her intentions and the outcome. She had hoped to create embarrassment, but instead she had become a cautionary tale of envy and overreach. As the evening progressed, her attempts to regain attention were met with polite nods and empty responses. Her whispered accusations and thinly veiled complaints could not overshadow the truth that everyone now saw clearly. She had tried to undermine me and failed spectacularly. Meanwhile, I reveled in the subtle yet undeniable victory, savoring the poetic justice that had unfolded. The dress she had tried to ruin my day with had, in fact, become the symbol of my triumph over her manipulation. By the end of the night, the story had already cemented itself in family memory. Guests would recount how the bride, calm and composed, had navigated sabotage with grace and wit, while the sister whose envy had fueled the scheme had been undone by her own hubris. It wasn't just about the gown. It was about reclaiming the narrative, showing that intelligence, patience, and quiet resilience can turn someone else's malicious intent into your advantage. Looking back, I realized the beauty of true revenge. It doesn't always need to be loud or confrontational. Sometimes the most satisfying justice comes when someone's plot collapses under the weight of their own arrogance. My sister's desire to humiliate me backfired spectacularly, leaving her scrambling while I stood tall, radiant, and victorious. The moral was clear: schemes born of envy rarely succeed, especially when met with patience, strategy, and poise. That day taught me more than just a lesson in patience or cleverness. It reminded me that power lies in composure and foresight. I didn't just survive her sabotage, I turned it into an unforgettable display of triumph. And watching her realize, too late, that her own machinations had elevated me instead of diminishing me was the sweetest revenge of all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Sweet Revenge Unfolded for more. New episodes drop every single day,